All right, folks, welcome to episode 11 of Allergic to Silverware. What a guest we have. Me and Keith's former manager, Felix Healy, needs no introduction. Former Sligo Rovers, Lisburn Distillery, Derry City, Finn Harps, Port Vale, Coleraine, Derry City. Had a great career, had a good career in management until I think me and Cowan finished his career in 2011.
Apologies,
certainly not allergic to silver. Anyway, he was allergic to a razor in the 80s. He had that old handlebar for a few years. But top man, we're delighted to have him on. And the reason, if you're wondering why we're wearing a shirt and tie, is when Felix was manager, he liked us to look the part. We mightn't have played it, but he wanted us to look the part. And as he always said to us, if you look good, you feel good, you play good. So that's our motto, and that's why we've got the shirt and tie on. So Felix, thanks for joining us, top man.
Not a problem at all, Chief. I have to say I've been very impressed by the way you've conducted yourselves over the last couple of weeks. You and Mr. Cowan, I think Ant and Dick are shouting themselves.
So how's things for yourself, Felix?
Not so bad, Keith. Obviously, from a music point of view, I've done a couple of birthday parties in the last 6 months, but that's it. That's it, and everybody is in this. That's in the profession I'm in. I mean, I've been full time in the entertainment business for off and on for 25 years. Mm-hmm. Even when I was managing Derry, I was doing 2-3 gigs a week, managing Harps. As you know, I was still, leaving Finn Park and going to do gigs, and I've been doing that for 40 odd years. And to all of a sudden come to a stop and do basically a couple of gigs in 6 months, it's a tough time for anybody. I mean, I'm 65. I wouldn't want to be a full-time musician and be 35 and have a mortgage and a car and everything else. So
that's tough.
But it's a tough time for everybody.
Yeah. 100%.
You look as if you've been stuck indoors for about 6 years.
That's a recurring theme here that that Chief seems to get a touch here every week regarding his skin tone or lack of skin tone. So it's
not doing myself any favours, is it?
Well, to be honest, the only thing I can see, he's melted onto that wall. He's looking the ad you see on TV.
The white shirt doing no favours at all, Felix, is it?
It's a tie, I can see.
A floating tie.
As you were saying on air, the first introduction I had to Felix, and one of the first things I remember him saying to me was saying, "Jesus Christ, son, you look paler than Tom Hanks did in Philadelphia."
Your playing career, I suppose, first, Felix, started with Sligo Rovers, not with Derry City. How did that come about?
Well, obviously, Derry weren't in the league at that time. I left St. Columb's College at 14, supposedly to go to Manchester City, and I was going to college in Manchester. And that fell through, and I was only 14. And instead of going back to the college, I basically was training to work. And to cut a long story short, I ended up being an apprentice butcher. But how I got to play for Sligo was that Johnny Crossan had just come back from the continent, and he got the job at Sligo. And there was about 7 or 8 other guys from Derry who were in the team. Kevin McCool, the late Seamus McDowell, Shakes, as everybody knew him by. Kevin McCool's brother was various other Derry guys. I mean, that particular time, a lot of Derry guys at Harps, a lot of Derry guys playing for Athlone. And on the
day, because Derry were out of the league, was it, Felix?
It was, yeah. When I made my debut in 1975, I was 19, and we beat Athlone 3-1 at Sligo. I scored a couple. And of the 22 players that day, there was something like 13 of them from Derry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like playing a summer cup match in Buncrella. It was Liam McCool, who played at Sligo in the early days. He played a few matches for Distillery, and again, he was the driver. And I ended up signing a year's contract with Distillery. Played 6 or 7 matches. Liam got dropped from the team, and I ended up sitting on my backside for another year.
Because you still didn't drive?
I just didn't drive. And it was only at the end of that contract that I signed for Harps.
Yeah.
When that contract ended, I signed for Harps. Then
that's the gaffer then, Felix, was he?
Busty, Ewan Blake, lovely man.
Yeah.
And I was at Harps for pre-season, and I got transferred on the 3rd of October, which I think was yesterday. Yesterday, 42 years ago. something like that.
Yeah.
But it was one of those where I joined Harps, a lot of Derry lads there at the time. It was one of the most enjoyable three-month period I ever had. I never laughed as much. The crack was 90. There were some great players. We played Everton in the UEFA Cup, and I only played in the first match because Paul McGuinness had a bit of a cold and maybe didn't fancy it.
Was that at Goodison Park or Finn Park?
The first match was at Finn Park, and I did well. And then we played them 2 weeks later at Goodison. And then the following week, the following Sunday, we played a match at Finn Park. And a scout from Port Vale was there looking at Graham Fox, who was a left back playing for Sligo. Mm-hmm. But he saw me. And to cut a long story short, Fran came to see me on a Tuesday night. Fran Fields. And Tom Furlong, who a lot of the older viewers and listeners would know Tom Furlong. He was the secretary for a long time. And they had agreed a deal of £10,000 with Port Vale for my services. They had a problem. I was an amateur.
So what did that mean?
Well, it basically means I couldn't be transferred unless I signed a professional form.
Right.
And they conned me out of £1,500.
Oh.
Yes, because they should have given me the £1,500 to turn pro, and then I could transfer to Port Vale.
Fair.
I signed the form, and then they said after I signed it that Port Vale were going to look after the sign-on fee.
Oh. So they were putting it on Port Vale to give you the £1,500?
Yes.
Oh,
it was one of the many. It was one of the many cons. One of the many cons. I went to Port Vale, and I was on £90 a week, and within 2 weeks, I was on £200 a week, and was given an extra £3,000. And in my second game, Leicester City came in to buy me.
Jesus!
And because I was only there 2 weeks, the club wouldn't let me go. And it was a very, very difficult time. It was a crazy time because, I mean, a number of people asked me what actually happened in England. What happened was my marriage hadn't long broke up, and I had an 18-month-old son.
Right.
And I basically, the thing, Harps to Port Vale, and I'm sitting in England a week later, and I'm saying to myself, what am I doing here? And after about 2 months, I decided I wanted to go back home. And the club gave me 6 weeks off to think about it.
Yeah.
And at the end of 6 weeks, I said I wasn't coming back. And the following week, the chief scout at the club, Danny Mayer, arrived at my door in Derry. And to cut a long story short, I was promised the Crystal Palace at Terry Venables. I was promised there. Ron Atkinson at West Brom wanted to sign me.
Jesus Christ.
And
some names in there.
And at that stage, it was one of those where I was one of the hottest properties, but because people weren't sure whether I was going to stay in England or not, they were hedging their bets to see what happened. To cut a long story short, I came back home. I had it in my contract that I went home for a week every 6 weeks. I went back in July. I did pre-season. I was flying. It was in the papers every day. I was going here, I was going there. And on the 20th of August, I was due to sign for Bolton Wanderers. And they had Frank Worthington, they had Peter Reid, they had Sam.
Frank Worthington, baller.
They were basically a Premier League team.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, my brother died on the 19th of August. And instead of heading to sign forms with Bolton, I was on an airplane back from my brother's funeral. And at that stage, I went back to England the following week. And I basically decided there and then that once my contract would come to the end, that I was returning. I don't regret any of that. The one thing that when I did walk out at the end of my contract, I joined Coleraine, but I was only allowed to play in Ireland. I couldn't go back to England unless I went to Port Vale first. Now, I had the opportunity after the World Cup to sign for Luton Town. and a row developed between Port Vale and Luton and Coleraine. A man who was well known in the circles was the chief executive of the FA, Graham Kelly. And Bertie Peacock rang me and says, well, son, what do you want to do? Do you really want to go back to England? And I said, to be honest, Bertie, I'm not that fussed. So the rest is history. I stayed at Coleraine.
And just to cut across there for a second, so there was a ban almost put on you. If you go back to England, you have to play for Port Vale. And then how many years are we talking here between the World Cup and when you left Port Vale?
Well, I left the Vale in 1980. John McGrath and John Rudge came to see me the night that we played Wales. I played against Wales at the racecourse at Wrexham. And Rudgy and Big John came to see me and wanted me to come back because I was
Felix, how did you play that night? Did you play well that night? Did you have a good game?
Well, we lost 3-0, but I walked off a pitch and Billy Bingham shook my hand and said, son, you're going to Spain with us. The game I played against Scotland, I played up front with a lunatic called Bobby Campbell. And when you're in the team like that and you're playing Scotland, we drew 1 each and it was a decent game and could have gone either way.
And all them boys be playing for Scotland.
Dalglish and John Robertson and I mean, Bingy asked me to pick up John Wark from corners. Now, anybody of a certain age would know John Wark.
Liverpool. Was he with Liverpool, Ipswich?
He had a moustache like you, Felix, didn't he?
Yeah, I know. And I said, Bingy's having me fucking on here. Yeah. You know, he wants me to pick up John Wark from corners. Yeah. I could barely pick myself up from corners. No, and
grab a jersey. Grab a jersey. A wise man always told me, grab a jersey.
Yeah. You see how wise he is? Yeah. But the thing about the Wales match was the Wales team had a really great team. You know, Rushy was playing, Ian Rush was playing, and you know, Ratcliffe, the guy at Everton, a really good side.
Yeah.
But we lost 3-0. But the great thing about it was I played in midfield.
Mm-hmm.
And because it wasn't going so well for us,
a
lot of guys kept giving me the ball.
Right.
Which didn't happen in the Scottish match.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing
but guys didn't want to know, Felix. They didn't want to get on the ball. That's what you told me before.
Yeah, one or two went missing here. And they kept giving me the ball. And one of the things about playing international football, guys, is international football is easier than playing in the Ulster Senior League. But you've got to be able to play.
Mm-hmm.
You get more time.
Yeah.
You know, in the Ulster Senior League, you're playing the bad surface. You're not playing against all kinds of different stuff. And it's one of those where you do get more time and you're playing with better players and it is easier to play, but you've got to be able to play. But that was the great thing about that, and it helped me go to Spain. When I went to Spain, I mean, Bingy, Billy said, you know, we got there and, you know, and he basically said, look, you have to remember, this is a team that's qualified through whole qualifying. So it basically picked itself except for one spot. And that was between me or Norman Whiteside. Now,
they get in the starting team.
Getting the starting team. And Norman was 16 playing for Manchester United. And I was 22, 23 playing for Coleraine. So who do you think he picked, guys?
Yeah, well, on that World Cup, so the first game against Spain, you don't play. Did you expect to play, or did you think that Whiteside was going to play up front, and was the system at that time?
I knew Norman. The first game was against Yugoslavia. Then we played Honduras. The Yugoslavs had a lot of really good players,
mm-hmm.
but there was all kinds of frictions. You know, as you've seen, that country's now split up.
Yeah.
There was a war 10 years after it, sure.
In Yugoslavia, basically, never tried a leg.
Yeah.
Match was a 0-0 draw, and I warmed up that much. It was going on that many times, but at 0-0, Bingy was of the opinion, you know, we're not going to change anything. And against Honduras, once it got to the stage where he felt, because we had Spain coming up, we needed to score a goal.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I was introduced. We spent 12 days at Brighton before we went to Valencia. where we were based.
Acclimatized.
Just went to Brighton.
Well, it was warmer in Brighton than it was in Valencia. It was in the 80s. And we did a mini pre-season in Brighton. It was horrific. I mean, I tell you what, Chief, you could have been doing well on the beach at Brighton there for 2 weeks.
To get a wee colour, lad.
Yeah. And somebody says you're like the colour of boiled shite.
Jesus Christ.
But it was.
You got the shade round out of you in Brighton, did you?
Oh, geez. It was unreal. It was unreal. But we go to Valencia, and then when you get on against Honduras and you go for a run, and you try to, you know, when you go for your first run and you try to take a breath.
Yeah.
The only other experience I've had of something like that is if you're in a sauna for 15 minutes and you try to breathe, it's almost as if your lungs become on fire. And it was just hard to believe. And when you get on to a stage like that, I got on with 15 minutes to go. It was the quickest 15 minutes of my life.
Yeah.
And it was, you just wanted to play, give me the ball, make things happen, and give me the ball. And everybody's really disappointed afterwards because they thought, you know,
you're expected to win.
For any chance of us making it through to the next round, you know, nobody saw us beating Spain. Mm-hmm. You know, if truth be told, everybody was packing, going home. I mean, there wasn't even a hotel booked. There wasn't even a hotel. There wasn't a hotel booked or nothing for after the Spanish match. And we ended up in the airport hotel in Madrid because it was the only one left. And Bingy nearly went berserk because he liked to stay in 5-star stuff, you know.
Right.
It was one of those. And then against Spain, you know, I was coming on so many times against Spain, even warming up out on the pitch before, and it was just unbelievable.
And was he telling you against Spain, warm up, Felix, warm up?
Well, he, in the dugout, he says to me, you're going on, get ready, go on. And I'm halfway out the dugout. It's one of those, you know, you're in that kind of, you know, you're in underneath.
Yeah. What stage of the match is that, Felix? What stage of the game?
It's about 10 minutes in the second half, but Mal getting sent off changed the whole.
That's right, yeah.
I mean, Bingy never spoke to Mal for about 4 months after it. I mean, it was crazy that Mal got sent off, but to be fair.
What did he do? Remind me, I can't remember this, the sent off. I remember the goal that Armstrong scored. What did he do?
Well, it basically, the guy come over and pushed Mal, and Mal put his hands on him, and the referee gave him everything, and he sent him off. It was crazy. It wasn't even a booking. He got sent off.
You forgot you're in Spain too, so you're going to get every decision. They're going to get every decision going.
Yeah. And it was absolutely, it was crazy. And Mal got sent off, and that changes the whole complexion. But there was an awful lot of stuff that went on around that time. I mean, Bingy says to me, I'm sorry, son, I have to put a defender on. And he calls for a defender, and the defender shouts over, what the fuck do you want me to go on for? But there's a lot of history between that particular guy and Bingy. But that's a story that other people, you know, that was just hard to believe. And eventually the guy says, stand on the touchline and says, well, you know, where do you want me to play? And Bingy shouts, well, just get fucking out there.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And this is going on in a World Cup match.
And is your man throwing the toys out of the pram a wee bit because he hasn't started, and he's like, what the fuck you want me to go on for?
The toys were thrown out of the pram in Brighton. I think the toys had been long out of the pram long before that, and I think there'll be many people who will tell stories about a number of things that happened around that time in years to come. There's a lot more to that, but that will come out in years to come.
Sure, come out in the
platform. This the platform.
Come on, let her loose.
Not like you to hold back, Felix. Not like you to hold back.
There was an incident where we were doing this exercise. It was a 2-minute exercise, and it was one of those. You went up over hurdles, you went underneath, up and down and round and in between and all kinds of different things. And you had to do it inside 2 minutes. And this particular guy stepped over the first hurdle and he went for a walk. And everybody's giving it one of those. You see, giving it one of those. You see, here we go. Here we go. And to cut a long story short, Bingy says to him, I'll make you run a fucking marathon. And your man says, and I'll walk that too. The way that Bingy set up, he made people cross the ball from deep, and he relied on Big McClelland and Big Nickel just to head everything away. And everything was based on 11 minutes. I mean, he parked the bus before, as I've said recently, he parked the bus before Mourinho knew what a bus was. You know, and Bingy had, every match was 0-0, he'd be delighted.
Yeah.
And then you'd
that doesn't sound like you'd enjoy that type of football, Felix, though.
No, it just to drive me scary. I mean, I was talking to somebody about this recently, Chief, where it was incredibly difficult when you played in training, for example, every day, because your natural instincts were to go and play. Whereas when you got into that situation, you weren't too, I was never too sure, just keep the ball. Everything was to keep the ball. You know, it's not new. It's like some people will say to you now, you know, about everybody now wants to keep the ball. That's not new. You know, it's and that's the way it was then. And you kept, and you know, and I think I did a TV interview and all the boys were laughing behind us. Just they keep playing like this, the next World Cup's going to be played with a square ball. You know, and it was one of those where it was really frustrating for somebody like me. The day after the Spanish, the 2 days after Spanish match, there was a training session, and I threw the head because I didn't get on the pitch, and I threw the head, and
Did you throw the toys out of the pram?
I threw the toys out of the pram, Chief. And
Well, has this been like so? After the Spain game,
after the Spanish match,
Spanish match, you're bound to have a bit of a night out and a bit of a sing song and all that type of thing.
Well, there was a sing song after the match. You know, I actually was asked to sing Danny Boy for all the TV people. And that ended up a whole row because the TV people wanted overtime to stay on. And I ended up singing Danny Boy to the world's press and all the players lined out in front of me in the hotel in Valencia. You know, you had all the top guys, you know, Jimmy Hill and all the, you know, you can imagine what it's like. Everybody descended on the hotel just outside Valencia. The party continued to 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I threw my toys out at the first training session, which was a day and a half later, because of what actually happened with me supposed to be going on and all that happened in that 2 or 3 minute period, which was crazy.
Yeah,
and that's where I threw the toys out of the pram, and I ended up sitting in the stand for the next 2 games. Me and Mal Donaghy sitting watching the matches.
What did you say to Bingham? How did you throw the toys out of the pram?
No, it was just, there was a couple of things happened in matches and this, that, and the other. I took a free kick and I kicked it about 50 yards over the post. You know, it was one of those, and
Excellent.
And yes, and did really stupid stuff, and the body language was great and everything else. And,
do you regret that now, Felix? Because
of course,
do you understand why he didn't bring you on? Because obviously, it was a setting off. He maybe needed another defender on or someone more defensively orientated. Or do you still think he should have put you on, especially when the substitute reacted the way he did?
Well, it's amazing that somebody else when. If you look back, I heard Jerry Armstrong talking about this recently and some of the stuff he's done, and it's amazing the number of guys in the team who don't even know what actually happened on the touchline. They aren't aware of what actually happened and what actually went on. But I would have loved to have been out on the pitch against Spain.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have been out on the pitch against Spain. And I was so disappointed that it didn't get on. And the fact that what actually happened and what ultimately happened on the pitch as well, which is another story, which not too many people know as well. That was incredibly frustrating for me And
it'd be unreal to be a part of it. Something so historic like that. I know you're a part of it, but it's never the same if you don't play it. I understand what you mean. Like.
Yeah, the other thing that people don't appreciate is that we played Austria next, we played France next, we played Austria and then France. And in the Austria game, you often see it sometimes that Jimmy Nicholl goes up a line and he crosses this ball and Big Billy Hamilton scores a goal. And Mal and I are talking in the stand, and Mal says, Jesus, if we score another one, we might have to stay another week. And we're talking about this back in the hotel. And Jimmy Nick says, funny, when I was rolling back, I was thinking the same thing myself. I learned more about the game in my first year managing at Coleraine than I learned in the previous 15. Because the game, when you play it and what you do as a manager, are two completely different things.
Yeah.
For two different things. And did I learn anything? But bringing, the one thing I would learn is it simple messages. Don't complicate it. You know, don't complicate it. My wee dog. Can you hear my wee dog?
That's for the episode, the dog versus the cat.
There we go, folks. The first dog I've ever had. And then he said, "Who's this wee boy?"
This is Luna.
I thought you were going to say Chief. I thought you were going to say that's Chief. That's the wee dog, Chief.
It's amazing. I mean, I probably said this to you guys. You've probably heard me say this before, but you know, when you're 20 years of age, you think you know everything, and then when you get to 30, you start having doubts. And then when you get to 35, you have serious doubts. And then when you get to 40, you're embarrassed at how little you actually know. 20, you don't realise that when you get to your age, for example, Keith, you know, another year or two, I'm never going to be able to play again. Mm. You know, my legs is going to go.
Yeah.
But when you're 20, that's a lifetime away.
Yeah.
You know, I was 65 last week, you know. When I was 20, that was a different universe.
Yeah.
And it's trying to put it into the heads of people at how important that moment is at that time in their life, because that will dictate what happens next week, it happens the following month, and what happens, and everything has a consequence. Yeah. I remember Chrissy Brain saying to me, Chrissy said, I don't know what moral courage is. You know. And I've heard
not the smartest, Brainy, is he?
No, well, he is.
Be surprised, really, to be honest.
Yeah, he's not as white as you. But football, when you play competitive football, it's more than a game. It tells you a lot about yourself and what you want to achieve, and how, I mean, you guys have heard me say, how badly do you want to win? And it's people themselves that stop themselves from being players. It's individuals that stop themselves. It's not a manager, it's not anybody else. I mean, you take the game that was on today. I mean, it's not Solskjaer's fault the way that Paul Pogba behaved in that match today. That's Paul Pogba's mentality.
Yeah.
And he will regret that in 10, 15 years' time.
Aye.
But now, because he's 26 and he's a very wealthy guy, he can play tomorrow. But when he's 10 years older and he can play, that's when he regret the way he played today. And a lot of the messages I try to give it, a lot of it's codology. Jim McLaughlin would call it codology, right? You're trying to give the same message, make people aware and appreciate, make the best of it, and you can determine your own, how successful you're going to be. I remember footballers, I mean, I'm not going to name a couple of managers, but a couple of managers I know, really high profile, one of the most famous guys in the country, ex-footballer, managed. And the only thing he ever had to offer his team was pass the ball. And then when somebody made a mistake, he would get on to them for making a mistake. You can get anybody from the stand to do that. It's easy to come into a dressing room and slaughter somebody in the dressing room. Did you ever hear me slaughter anybody?
I never heard you raise your voice once, I don't think.
No.
Because there's no point. It's much harder to talk sense than it is. I know managers who spend their 10, 15 minutes at half time ranting and raving at players about how bad you know, Gavin Dykes used to talk about Derry City. They used to run off the pitch if they were getting beat at half time because they were going into the dressing room to take their clothes down because it was going to get covered in tea and water and everything. Because Keely would come in and start throwing things in the room.
I heard he was a maniac, right enough.
You know, and how does that help? That doesn't help.
Well, it was one Felix where it was almost kind of like there, you know, if you annoy your parents or something like that there, sometimes you'd rather that they'd come in and give out to you because you know it was the kind of disapproval you would come in and that would have been like
I'm going to tell you a quick story. I never, as you know, would come in and batter somebody. And there was a player played for me at Derry. And he's the only guy I've ever raised my voice to in the dressing room after a match. And I did it because he said I should do it. And I did it to him.
Who was it?
It was Pascal Vodka.
Oh.
Pascal and I were very close, and I went down and had a cup of tea in the house with Maria and blah, blah, blah. And
great player.
And Pascal says, you know, why don't you come in and use it, you know? And Pascal was great athlete, defensively. And I come in after the match, and I purposely had a go at him. And I ended up nearly fisticuffs. And I went down to him on the Tuesday morning, down to the house, and I had Maria made us a cup of coffee, and Pascal and I said, well, Pascal, what did I tell you? Did it achieve anything whatsoever? No. Did it achieve anything? Anything? No. I said, well, that's why I don't do it. Yeah. I said, I'd rather talk sense to you than shout at you, because anybody from the stand can come and shout at you. And the other thing about it is, and this is a fact, the more you educate players, the worse they get. It's one of the biggest crimes that are committed by the modern coaching fraternity. The more information you give to players, the worse you get. Because remember, at 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, they're all experts anyway. They're all experts.
Yeah. So
all you're doing is feeding them information by telling them the ins and outs. They don't need to know the ins and outs. Keith, do you need somebody to go and tell you to hit a ball?
No, not usually.
No. Well, see, if somebody wants to go and tell you hit a ball, you shouldn't be there in the first place.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah,
that's true. But Felix, that style of management you had, is what me and Cowan are trying to say, was very unique to us, because we were used to, you know, Paul Hegarty, player you played with, and manage was, you know, on the middle of the park, fucking forks, I can't watch you any longer, and they'd be roaring at me, and you know, that was the style. You were completely unique, and it was, you know, I wanted to know, like, was Jim McLaughlin like that? Is that who you took it from? Jim McLaughlin was Cam, yeah. Yeah,
I mean, I was great friends. Jim and I were both. Harry Gregg used to help me.
Oh yeah,
Coleraine, I know. Right, Harry. And Harry used to give people advice far too often. and Greggy would say to any young player, you see, if a manager ever comes into a dressing room and batters you, you know, just say, I agree with you. Now help me. And he says, I'll guarantee you, the minute you say, right, I agree, help me, is shut up. Because he doesn't know how.
Yeah.
Because that's all he's got to offer, is ranting and raving at you. The first time I went to Harps, I went to get them into the Premier Division. That was my aim. Mm-hmm. And I was going to leave. I've said this before. Because I knew I had no chance in the Premier Division. Not a prayer. in a prayer. And I went to a board meeting 2 weeks after we won promotion, and I came home from the board meeting, and I says, I'm off my head. And Eddie Sadak was going crazy. You're not serious, you're not serious, you're not serious. Well, I mean, to give you an example, the first game we played against Cork in the Premier Division, the two guys in centre midfield for Cork were Joe Campbell and George O'Callaghan, both getting 1,500 a week plus win bonuses. I have Mickey Funson and Wiz, because Anthony Gorman was suspended. On 30, you know the crack, 30-year-old, another 30 in the first team, the first team squad, and another 30. So they're €90 each, and they're playing against two guys in 1,500. And you're expected to win football matches. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's crazy. You know, League of Ireland football is a hamster changing the wheel. When I went back the second...
I look at Cork, I'm sure they're bottom of the league.
Yeah, but I mean, you look, Pat Fenlon has won 6, 7 championships. He's left an incredible mess behind him everywhere he's been. Mm-hmm. I mean, Stephen Kenny nearly put Derry to the wall twice.
Derry did go to the wall, Felix.
Yes. But they come back, but he nearly put them out of existence twice. That's a different thing completely. The second time I went to Harps, it wasn't about results for me. I don't think, I mean, Harps are playing Dundalk today. I don't know how that's finished, actually. But
it's 0-0. I think it's finished 0-0.
You know,
good result.
You can understand Dundalk and Sean Grovers. It's about results for them.
Yeah.
If you talk to Higgsy and you talk to Ollie, it isn't about results for them. It is to a certain extent. It's about survival. It's about trying to keep a club going.
Maybe, Felix, if you're Ollie Horgan and Hegarty and you're trying to survive, maybe you can only think short term. Is that part of the problem as well? Maybe you can only think about...
That is very much because you have to remember, I mean, for example, I'll go back to what happened with Stephen Kenny, and I like Stephen Kenny, and I think he's a decent manager. But what happened at Derry was about Stephen's CV, nothing else. And that's the other problem. And Stephen was spending money in there. I mean, if Derry had beat Paris Saint-Germain, do you remember the European run?
Yeah.
Derry had actually, by beating Paris Saint-Germain, the club might have folded. It was not much debt. It was not much debt then. So when I went into Harps, come back to the question, for me it was never about results. It was trying to get people to appreciate, try and do something with the club, as opposed to being in a rat race that you're not going to win. I say to Peter Hutton, pizza, when we won the league at Derry in 1997, Peter scored a lot of goals in midfield. And I used to say to Peter, if I see you taking any more than 2 touches, I'll take you off. Because that wasn't his game.
Was his game just bombing into the box?
He was bombing in the box. 1 touch finish. 1 touch finish. I said, just give it to people that can play. Just give it to people that can play. Give it to Higgsy, who was by far and away, Paul Hegarty was a sensational footballer.
Was he a good footballer, Higgsy?
Higgsy was Roy Keane.
I would have had the understanding that he was an enforcer and that, but maybe I didn't know he was that good a ball player.
You see, that's been labelled at Higgsy for a long time. Higgsy was a brilliant footballer.
Right.
See this idea that he worked hard and he run hard and he was a harrier and he get stuck in. And Higgsy could play. Higgsy would be the first guy on your team sheet. Right. You know, as I've often said, you know, people talk about Liam Coyle and Higgsy. You know, Liam was Cantona, Higgsy was Keane. You know, Higgsy won your leagues. Football is a game of footballers and runners. And when your runners try to become footballers, you fucking get problems. You know, and there's an awful lot of runners who think they're footballers. And that's
what do you reckon, Pan? Do you want to come out?
I'm not, well, I know what category you might fall under, Chief, but I'm struggling to figure where I'm in there. A runner and a footballer are never too good either.
Well, the thing about it is, Keith, is it you've got to be able to play when you have it, and you've got to be able to play when you don't have it.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to be able to play when you don't have it. And you have been as good at Finn Park as anybody else. I mean, Big Jim Sheridan played centre half for Hearts for years. Legendary. Great player for Finn Harps.
Yeah.
Don't give him the ball. Jim knew he didn't want the ball. Derry Healy's probably the best central defender there has been in League of Ireland football. Never wanted the ball.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, could he defend and could he organise a back four, which is the most important part of any football team?
Back
four. The big man, certainly. The Harps could be doing with the big man at the minute, as far as I'm concerned. You reckon?
He's probably getting a fortune in East Belfast.
He's up there with the brethren at East Belfast, happy out.
Hey, he's probably earned more at Glentoran in the last year, and he's earned in 10 years at Harps.
I remember the story, so I'm going to have to ask you whether this is true or not. So I'm going to stitch. I'm going to stitch Anthony Gorman up here because Anthony was talking.
Okay.
Huh?
Go ahead.
So Gorman told me before, like a great one, I got some laugh at it, but he said he'd heard it when you were a player at Coleraine that apparently you were left out of the team one particular game at the showgrounds, which was obviously a surprise to you. So you got up out of the dressing room and left, and the perception was Felix is gone. And then at 5-3 or whatever, a wee knock came on the door, and it was you, and you put your head round the door and you asked the manager, could he come outside? And you had apparently in the meantime gone to the referee's room, got the team sheets that Coleraine had submitted, and gave the manager the opportunity to change the team before the match started. Now, is that bullshit?
Nonsense. Nonsense.
Total nonsense, or just shades of grey in there? I'm sure you can sort of clarify.
That is cool. I'll tell you, that's total nonsense.
How does a story like that manifest itself?
Well, you know, it's like, I mean, there's a Coleraine football group, and I put my first agreement with Coleraine. I had a copy of it, and I posted it up on their Facebook page because they were looking for some stuff, you see. And Jack Doherty, you guys would know Jack Doherty, but Jack Doherty is one of the most famous guys ever in Irish football, legendary chairman, built half a Derry. He was a builder and constructor. And every trick in the book, Jack would be up to. He was worse than Fran, but a brilliant character. And his grandson put up something about, he remembers his granddad saying he had a disagreement with me over 10p, you know, which is complete and utter nonsense, you know. But that's it, you know. It's a good story.
Stories grow legs. I know. I remember.
It, yeah.
I thought it was a cracking story. Like,
I'll tell you what happened at Coleraine one day. I played for Coleraine for 7 years. My father only ever came to see me play once, and I was taken off at half time. Jim Platt, who wasn't the greatest manager in the world, took me off at half time. There was a bit of argy-bargy in the dressing room at half time. And he took me.
Did he give you a reason as to why he was hooking you?
No idea. Jim was one of those guys that felt that I was too big for my boots, you know, one of those, and you know, with the team that Jim had, I mean, I've said this before, with the team that Jim had, if Jim McLaughlin had managed that team, we'd have won 2 championships, and Roy Coyle wouldn't have won 26 trophies. And afterwards,
So Roy Coyle has a success. Put a lot of his success down to poor management at Coleraine. I'll tell him that.
Hold on, 2 ticks, guys.
Jeez.
So let me bring you back in 10 minutes.
Don't ask. Don't mind.
Jim Platt left me out of a game in
Same Jim Platt that was the goalkeeper at the World Cup that kicked off with Billy Bingham.
Yes, it's the same boy, Jim. Yeah, he's now a councillor. He works at Middlesbrough, but he's a councillor in Middlesbrough. But Jim, we played Locomotive Leipzig at Coleraine, and it was 0-0, and they were a really good side. Really good side. There were 7 of them played for East Germany against France the following week and beat them 2-0 in Paris.
Jeez.
So we're playing them out in Leipzig the following week, And the night before, Jim says to me, I'm not starting you tomorrow. I says, right, okay. Right, okay. You're not starting me tomorrow? Right, all right. Okay, whatever you like.
Those boys out of the pram?
No, wasn't. He says, no, I'm going to try and save you for the, keep you fresh. And of course, when he announced the team, all the other guys are, the focus wasn't on the match. The focus was on the fact that I wasn't playing. Nothing. I'm just saying this as it was.
Yeah.
And they were more concerned. Fuck, he's not playing. What's going on? There were 4 down after 12 minutes.
At least you get warmed up.
And he says to me at his time, "You ready to come on?" The Benfica thing was amazing. Once the draw was made, the phone never stopped ringing in the Brandywell, and everything was just Benfica, and everybody was coming. A couple of documentaries were made. There was Sky News were in town before before they are what they are now, and all kinds of stuff. They had an amazing group of players. Amazing players. One of the centre backs was when Brazil won the World Cup in '90. He was one of the centre backs in the team. Won the World Cup in 1990. They had 3 Brazilian. There was 11 internationals. The big fella Magnusson played up front, Sweden. Fella in midfield called Jonas Tern, big blonde-haired fella. Fucking what an engine he had. And the match at the Brandywell, we were unlucky to lose that 2-1 actually.
He's played well. You were struggling with Paul Doolan, and beside you, a bit of a water carrier, was he?
Dooler's won something like 6-7 championships.
I'm only messing. Who am I to be slagging Paul Doolan? But I remember watching it and I was thinking, I think the cat's getting frustrated with Doolan here. He lost the ball a couple of times.
Well, the thing about Dooler was one of those guys that a bit like Stephen Capper, where he was. The one thing we had with Dooler was he always used to go too early, but he scored a lot of goals from midfield. I mean, that year him and I scored 19 goals each from midfield. That year.
All 19 each?
19 each. Yeah. We scored more goals and we didn't win a thing that year. It was crazy. The only team to score more goals than us that year were Bohemians, I think, back in 1929. It was crazy. It was a crazy year.
So some say.
Benfica, there was only a couple of minutes to go to half time and it was 0-0. And the big fella Magnusson hit one and deflected off Paul Kern, went right up over the top and dropped in the back of the net, 1-0 down. But in the second half, for the last half an hour to go, they were like fucking marathon runners and we were like fucking marathon eaters. It was fucking one of those. They were running past you like you were fucking, you'd stopped, But
that's probably that extra, obviously, professional fitness to say that. But you've fairly competed with them in the Brandywell. I watched a good bit of the game. Enjoyable match. You had some team. Who was the best player in that 89 side, would you say? You can't say yourself. So apart from yourself, who was the top player in the team? Well,
Dooler in midfield, Paul Doolan was a serious player. Wasn't gifted in so many ways, but end product was serious. End product. I mean, he's won 6-7 championships with 4 different clubs. Yeah. And if you wanted to go down to Cork and go to war with Cork, Higgsy and Paul Doolan, you could do worse.
Take you back to we spoke about it earlier, just in that season that I suppose that's the season after that Harps got promoted. And it was one of the first games down in Waterford. I remember because I was in the stands. I didn't make the squad that game, but one of your first matches, and I think Paddy McGranahan and John Minow ended up on the transfer list. Well, they definitely ended up on the bench that night. Was there a reason in particular for that?
Well, I was trying to give the two of them a kick up the backside.
Yeah.
I mean, I was trying to give the two of them a kick up the backside. They were never going anywhere. But they were too long at Harps, like a number of guys. They were too long. They were set in their ways. And too many bad habits. Like a number of guys, you know, Kevin McHugh was as good a finisher as I've ever seen in my life at any level.
Mm-hmm.
But he had so many bad habits outside the box, he used to drive me scary. And Paddy and Minnow were the same. And I thought by giving them a kick up the arse, you know, to get a reaction.
Yeah.
But they were never going anywhere. And this is going to be very controversial. In the course of the last 30 years, there have been a lot of very good players at Finn Harps. But they've only been very good in the first division. There have been very, very few really good Premier Division players at Finn Park in the course of the last 30 odd years. 15, 20 max.
Yeah.
The rest have all been very good First Division players. They have not been good Premier Division players. Fact. And that's why it's yo-yoed. Yo-yoed.
Right.
When you throw in the money situation and everything else, and that's, again, when I go back to the bigger picture, it goes back to the health of the club is more important to me than anything else.
Right.
But when you look at Harps relegation battles, playoff matches, there's a reason for that. There's a reason. You don't have to be a genius to work that out. You know, there have been a lot of very good players at Harps, but they've only been very good in the First Division. They're not top Premier players.
Yeah.
And to be honest, they haven't had the money for them.
Yeah. But surely there's a few. Surely there's a few over the years that you would have thought, he's a good Premier League player. He's a good Premier League player. He's a good, and then maybe they would have had more success at a different club.
Well, Jonathan Minnock went to Shelbourne, won a league, didn't he? So, like, would you class Minnow as being a top? Like, he was a good Premier Division player, because I think him and Pizza went to Shells and they won a league, didn't they? And they played in the Champions League.
No, I don't think Minnow was a top player. In my own view, I don't think Minnow was a top player. No, I think he's blonde-haired left back with a lovely left foot, and you get away with murder. Guys with lovely left foots will get away with murder. Trust me, I've seen it happen so many times. You know, John Gerard McGettigan, Anthony Gorman, Paul Hegarty, you know, going back 25, 30 years, top players.
Yeah.
Harps have had top players.
Tom Mohan was a top player.
Hey?
Tom Mohan
was a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Tom Mohan was a top player playing wide.
Okay.
He's a top centre midfield player in the First Division. He wasn't a top centre midfield player playing in the Premier Division. What Tom got away with in the First Division playing the centre midfield, he would not get away with that in the Premier Division. The game would pass him by. Tom was a worker, and he got away with that in the First Division. Tom Mohan played for me the year at Derry, and he played wide right, and he had a sensational year. Brilliant year.
Yeah.
Up and down the pitch, and he stopped you playing. But having the craft to play in there at the top level against the like of Cork and Bows and Shells and Dundalk, no, not good enough.
Do you regard Kevin McHugh as a top striker in the Premier Division, or does he fall into the category of what you're saying?
Kevin McHugh, I feel sorry for Kevin McHugh, because Kevin McHugh should have been in England. But Kevin McHugh played in really poor Harps teams who played 4-5-1, and he was left on his own up there. And when you get it, Kevin, just keep it till we try and get out. And he developed so many bad habits. And he could have been a top player. But Kevin, yes, could have been a decent, as I said, scoring goals. He was as good as I've seen anywhere. And I mean anywhere. Finishing wise in the box, he was top class.
Stephen Kenny, what's your thoughts on him getting the job? You know, there's a lot of optimism, but, you know, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. But do you think he'll be given enough time to do what he's trying to do, which has changed maybe the culture and the way Irish national teams have traditionally played, and B, will he be a success? Do you think he has the players at his disposal to play that way? What's your opinion on it? And I know it's very early to judge, but what do you reckon?
I think the criticism that he's got has been outrageous. I think that's outrageous. This idea because he hasn't played for anybody. I mean, Mourinho didn't play for anybody, neither did Arsene Wenger. I think
Benitez never played for anyone either.
Not really. I mean, I think that's outrageous, and some of the stuff that's been fired at Stephen in the last couple of weeks, I just, and particularly from people who have never won a thing in their lives, I think there's a lot of stupidity in football, incredible stupidity, right at the top levels of the game, off the pitch and on the pitch. Stephen Kenny's not stupid. He's going to have a bit of luck, which every manager needs. It could be, you know, like everything else, the ball hits the inside of the post and goes in. You're a world beater that hits the outside of the post and goes wide, and you get the sack. I mean, that's the nature of the beast, which is crazy, and football is crazy. But I don't think Stephen is stupid. Does he have the players that are capable of getting him the results at the level that he's at? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the players are there. You know, over the last 10 years or more, you know, you'd be struggling to say who, you know, Jack Turton was incredibly successful. But I mean, he had McGrath, he had Lawrence, and he had Brady. It's some, you know, world-class footballers.
Yeah.
Now, in relation to Ireland, doesn't have that at the minute. There's a lot of things that go on within a squad.
Yeah.
And certain things, the dynamics that are there that we don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen made a bit of a red out. And there's a number of people who have gone who deserve to go because of the way they've been behaving, because of things that I know.
Right.
And they deserve to go. And
from the Irish setup, sorry.
Yeah?
From the Irish setup or from...
Oh, from the Irish setup, right throughout the whole backroom staff and everything else. There was a number of bad apples. Let's put it like that.
Noel King, one of them, was he? I want to just throwing the cat amongst them.
I don't know, but I thought Kinger's criticism of Stephen Kenny.
That was shocking. I read it. That was outrageous.
But Noel's got another agenda. Kinger's got another agenda. And Kinger's, for a guy who's never won anything in his life. I mean, I played for Noel. Noel was supposedly this brilliant coach, and all he had to offer was pass the ball. I mean, that was it. Pass the ball. But Noel is everything that I detest about coaching. You know, Noel on the training ground could set up all kind of drills and do all kinds of stuff. But you know, people who can really coach know what's happening during the game. You know, when you set your team up and you know what's happening in the game. Again, guys, in terms of Stephen Kenny, it doesn't matter if you're Mourinho or Ancelotti or Klopp. If you don't have the players, you can be the best coach in the world. But if you don't have the players, you're not going to get results. I took over in 2005. I was at Gary Beckett's wedding, and I got a phone call. Higgsy and I were both at the wedding, and he got a phone call to tell me we didn't get the job, and I got the phone call to say I had got the job. And they asked me to take over.
That'd be an awkward conversation at Beckett's wedding, was it?
Well, no, Higgsy are grand. Higgsy's brilliant.
I say, Higgsy spat a soup out everywhere. He wasn't having that.
After giving the job to fucking Felix.
Up the bar for a couple of fat frogs. He loves it out fat frog.
The first match was the following night against Derry in the Brandywell. And I didn't even know who half the players were, right? I had no idea. And Trevor Scanlon was there at the time. Trevor was great. And he basically more or less took a team that night. But I think it was the following week when I really had my first conversation with the entire staff, you know, players. And if it wasn't the first, it was one of the first. And we had a meeting out in the centre circle in Finn Park. And my first words were, guys, can you go without your wages for 2 weeks?
Because they had to pay you, is that why? Is that you're saying on fee?
The cat wasn't cheap. The cat didn't.
Wrong people who were the bosses.
Yeah.
The wrong people who were the chiefs, who thought they were the chiefs. But when they were out on the pitch, they were Indians.
Right.
You know, and it wasn't a good, it wasn't, you know, one of the things I had to deal with, let's put it that way. And one of the reasons I got the job was because I told the board I would deal with it. I'm not too sure some of the others did.
Right.
But it was certainly a big issue.
I mean, did you met straight away with resistance, obviously, to that? Because you're trying to change the dynamics of the football club, essentially, like.
There was a couple of players who played for me who didn't particularly want me to get the job initially.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't want me to get the job initially, and they were part of that clique.
Yeah.
You know, they were.
Did you move any of them on? Was there an option to get rid of a few lads, or was it a case, well, I have to try and get these lads to play for me?
No, it was a case of trying to change the focus and change a couple of things, and a couple of things that were happening off the pitch and stuff that was happening on the way to the matches on the team bus and stuff like that. And there are certain wee things that we always did this, you know.
Yeah.
We always did this. And, Chrissy Breen was sensational.
Great player.
Could have played in England. It's just a pity that he was sensational. You know, there's a thing in football when you have the ball, you make the pitch as big as you can, and when you don't have it, you make it as small as you can. But when Chrissy was on the pitch for us, he made the pitch about 10 yards bigger because everybody was frightened of him.
Yeah.
He had pure real pace, didn't he? Like Breen,
he reminded me funny when Michael Owen started as when he was 16 playing for Liverpool.
That's right. Yeah.
He was a playing machine.
And he could finish as well. Breen could finish. Like he wasn't just.
If he had been like, if he was as good as McHugh, he'd have been at Manchester United.
Yeah.
I was more concerned about trying to get Joey and Denise and the people who were there to try and run the club within its means.
Yeah.
Within its means. Regardless of anything else. But the Holy Grail was always the Premier Division.
That's it.
Which doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Because, you know, because all you do is just, you accumulate more debt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the hamsters run a wee bit quicker.
And hamsters will run the night.
Here, boys. I'm gonna have to wrap it up here and head to bed.
It's nearly fucking Ramadan there.